Elder Scrolls. It's one of the biggest names in gaming ever. But what if I told you that this universe was hiding a secret? That the lands of Oblivion, Skyrim, Morrowind, and many more have given birth to some of the most horrifying, disturbing, and mind-bending revelations you've never heard of.
Really? Do come in! It's lovely in the Isles right now. Perfect time for this. Bring me a champion! Rend the flesh of my foes! A mortal champion.
For those of you that don't know, an iceberg is a deep dive into the strangest and most terrifying mysteries and conspiracies on any topic. So today, let's plunge into the world of Elder Scrolls, one of my personal favorites in all of gaming, where the first tier will be the more playful and lighthearted theories, and as we make our way down the list, we will unravel the most disturbing secrets of all of the Elder Scrolls. The Dre peoples on the surface are nothing especially notable. They're an interesting looking spider and crab-like creature that hails from Morrowind, but we see a lot of similar things in the Elder Scrolls series. They make their homes on both land and beneath the surface of many freshwater lakes, and are usually more docile and timid, but can become more enraged if provoked and can prove to be a worthy adversary. They are more intelligent than some wildlife, but in general they have no capacity for speech or communication with more advanced races. You see though, what actually makes the Dre so interesting isn't who they are now, but rather who they actually stemmed from in the past. Vivec, one of the three main great gods of Morrowind who we actually do meet in the games, was an astute historian and wrote many texts about the ancient world. And in some of these primeval documents, he talks about the long-lost and previous Dre culture. Apparently, thousands of years ago, the Dre were actually a much more advanced civilization, with many bustling and thriving cities, trade, riding, and most importantly, dominance. And not just dominance over the province of Morrowind, or even all of Tamriel for that matter, but rather, all of Nirn. By the way, for those of you that don't know what Nirn actually is, it's the name of the main planet that the series takes place on. It's part of a larger realm of existence called Mundus, which is encompassed not only by Nirn, but its two moons, Masser and Secundus, as well as the Divine Realm, shown here in black, which is home to other planets that house divine and sacred beings of great importance. Outside of that is the Red Zones, where Oblivion and the Daedric princes of more demonic presence live. And all of this is part of an entire realm of existence called Aetherius, which itself is a part of Aurbis, the name of the entire galaxy that houses Aetherius and the Void. The games as we know them take place on Nirn, and more specifically, one of the four main continents called Tamriel. So the Dre ruled over not just Morrowind, and not just Tamriel, but literally, if Vivec's writings are to be believed, all of this. So the question for the Dre becomes, how did such an advanced and powerful civilization of highly intelligent and capable beings that ruled over all of Nirn become a docile and much less threatening creature thousands of years later? It's not unheard of in the Elder Scrolls series for massive civilizations to have great power across Nirn, but in no history books do we hear about anything nearly as powerful as the Dre are described here. Did they truly rule over the entire world? And if they did, how did they lose their power? How do so few people remember their absolute dominance? Shouldn't there be more stories, more ruins, and more remnants of a great civilization long past scattered throughout all of Tamriel and Nirn, like we see with the Dwemer? This mystery spawns more questions than it answers, and it makes us even wonder about the validity of Vivec himself, along with some other small references to ancient Dre in other books. Either way, though, this is one of the most fascinating and thought-provoking mysteries in Elder Scrolls, and shows just how deep and well-designed the lore really is, And well, we're just getting started. There are a lot of less well-known enemies and entities scattered all throughout the worlds of each Elder Scrolls game, some more terrifying than others. But one of the most rare and horrifying examples of this is the Reaper from Skyrim. It's an enemy that most players don't even know exists, and can only be accessed within the Soul Cairn inside of Castle Volkihar from the Dawnguard DLC. Deep within the Soul Realm is a tower blessed with great magic, and upon entering it you'll find the Reaper, the only instance of this enemy in any of the games. The Reaper is a giant shade with green glowing eyes that wields a massive battle axe, and upon fighting him the Reaper will constantly summon adds and spit giant green acid at you. Once vanquished, the Reaper drops 3 black soul gems, and even more interestingly, a Daedric heart, suggesting that he is some sort of Daedra monster stemming from the lands of Hell, otherwise known as Oblivion in this universe. As to what exactly the Reaper is, it still remains unknown, whether he is a tool of destruction from some powerful Daedric prince or a hellish primordial stew. Something about this enemy is truly terrifying, especially considering it is the only time we see a Reaper in-game. Argonians are our favorite reptilian humanoid crossbreed in all of Tamriel, and they're actually one of the fan-favorite races you can play in most of the games. They usually come with special traits players can use, like breathing underwater, and can be a fun class to mix up the monotony of more rigid playstyles from human-like races. One question that has come to many players' minds, though, is if Argonians really are in fact reptiles, why do their females look like this? You see, reptilian creatures in real life don't actually breastfeed their young, and thus have not adapted to even grow larger chests, instead opting to just secrete fluids from their bodies. And yes, I'm not joking. But in the Elder Scrolls games, we can clearly see that for some reason, female Argonians seem to have disregarded this feature. We know from developer comments from even Pete Hines himself and some lore texts that Argonians are omniviparous, meaning they lay eggs within their bodies and hatch and birth them. But we also know from direct lore documents from the Black Marsh, the land in Tamriel from which Argonians hail, that next to Hiss trees specifically, Argonians actually lay their eggs. For those that don't know, the Hiss trees are an ancient race of sentient trees that are native to the Black Marsh that allegedly created the Argonians in the image of man and Myr, a general term for elves in Tamriel. The Argonians were meant to serve the Hiss in a symbiotic relationship, something we will talk about more later, but it still leads us to the question why the female Argonians even need breasts in the first place. The reason in lore the eggs are laid next to the Hiss in the Black Marsh is they feed on the sap from the trees, with many Argonians arguing that those born away from Hiss trees are less powerful beings. So maybe the reason female Argonians are built this way is to breastfeed their young Hiss tree sap when they are not laid as an egg by a tree. But this wouldn't make sense because then why would female Argonians living by the trees also have developed breasts? On top of this, we know from some developer comments and lore texts again that Argonians do keep their eggs inside of them when away from Hiss trees. On top of this, we know from some developer comments and lore texts again that Argonians that do keep their eggs inside them when they are away from Hiss trees use hystrophy to push Hiss tree sap from within their body through glands to help feed their baby eggs inside them, a process similar to many reptiles in our real world. So if the Hiss sap is being supplied before in the womb, and even Argonian females in Black Marsh are well endowed when the trees themselves are already providing nutrients, what gives? The best remaining theory is just that the female Argonians are simply made this way, as we know from the ancient Hiss tree stories that Argonians were made in the image of man and Myr. So maybe their breasts were simply there to make them look more similar to that image. And some theories even postulate that the Hiss created them that way to make it more easy for females to form relationships with other races, potentially to even spy on them in some sort of Hiss grand plan. We may never truly know, but something fishy is going on. All of the modern day Elder Scrolls games have begun in a very similar way. a prisoner finding his way out of his or her shackles and thrusting themselves into a brand new world. But it would seem the similarities stop there. In Morrowind, you play as a reincarnated general who turns out to be the revered and prophesized Nirn. In Oblivion, you play as the hero of Kavach that saves an entire realm from being consumed by Oblivion's chaos. And in Skyrim, you play as this idiot. On paper, these seem like obviously different characters and people. After all, how could the Neverine and Dragonborn be the same people? However, this is where it gets interesting. You see, countless years ago, the world of Nirn was created by a divine god called Lorkhan. This god deceived all his peers in the divine realm into pooling their resources to create Nirn, and this angered them very much. As punishment, he was killed by the other divines, led by Akatosh, that giant red dragon boy in Oblivion. His heart was thrust from his body and crashed into the area of Morrowind, creating the Red Mountain, and he was forever a banished and lost soul. Still, throughout all of history, many races have told stories of supposed Shezarines, which are believed to be mortal incarnations of the missing god, Lorkhan. So could it be that in every Elder Scrolls game, we are actually a Shezarine, a mortal amalgamation of Lorkhan himself, on a mission to defend the realm that he was responsible for creating in the first place? It would explain how we are always tasked with such important accomplishments and take the reins of important characters at such vital moments in history, leaving lasting impacts. It's also heavily implied from many texts in the game that this just might be the case. The second tier of our list focuses on the less well-known and scary theories in Elder Scrolls that can radically change how you perceive its characters and world. Oblivion is my personal favorite Elder Scrolls game, in large part because it was the first one I played as a kid, but also because it has many lesser-known and amazing quest lines that truly dip into the scary and thrilling side of the series. One of these that many people don't know about tells the story of an Altmore, or elf, mage who has stolen Vamira's powerful orb. Vamira is the Daedric Prince of Nightmares, and she is known for casting many souls into some of the most hellish places known to man. But in a twisted turn of fate, Vamira has not done this to our Altmer named Arkfed. Rather, he has stolen the orb from her himself. For some unknown reason, Arkfed has thrust himself into a twisted and demented nightmare, and you are tasked with going into this dream and getting Vamira's orb back for her. And so you do, and you are met with a desolate and dark landscape. One of, if not the scariest in the entire Elder Scrolls series, full of weird and demented sounds, small pathways leading to nothing, and a host of horrifying monsters in the dark. So as you make your way through the dungeon, you finally reach Arkfed's tower, and it is here you find his fateful letter. There is no world so great as the world of the mind. There is no voyager so well traveled as the traveler in the land of dreams. There is no abyss so deep as the well of terrors that lies within each of us. I have plumbed its depths. Arkfed seemingly finds great joy living in his greatest nightmare and falling deeper into the madness within his own mind. But we are never given any more than this. The most perplexing part about the entire ordeal is we still have no idea why Arkfed stole Vamira's orb in the first place, or why he has cast himself into his own living hell. It makes us seriously question who this man is, and more importantly, what he is up to and trying to accomplish. Could there be more than meets the eye here? Even after traveling into the depths of Arkfed's own mind, we still have so many questions left unanswered. Tamriel is home to a myriad of strange and interesting locations, many of which there's very little known about them at all. And one of the most interesting of all of these locations, shrouded in mystery, is for sure the Black Marsh, birthplace of the Argonians and Hist, located in the southeastern portion of Tamriel. It's a location we will assumedly visit in some faraway main entry Elder Scrolls game, but for now the region is simply spoken about briefly by some characters and in many lore books in the games. The Black Marsh consists mostly of overgrown vegetation and harsh swamplands with a variety of large and alien beasts that emerge from the waters. By all accounts, the Black Marsh is one of the least gentrified locations across the Tamrielic continent, with many roads being overgrown with fauna and wildlife, making it hard to even find your way between cities. And in these cities lies ruined and ancient architecture, with only rudimentary foundations for an economy and political system. The land is riddled with thieves and assassins hiding in the bushes, and simply traversing into the southmost portion of the marsh can prove deadly. However, one of the most intriguing mysteries in the marsh actually revolves around the Hist, the ancient sentient trees we spoke to earlier in Tier 1. You see, for longer than history has been written about Tamriel, the Hist have been indigenous to the land, and more specifically, in great numbers in the Black Marsh. And as the story goes, either through immaculate conception or through a primitive alligator race finding the Hist, the Argonians were born. The sap that the Hist produced was able to give the Argonians a new form, as well as a massive increase in intelligence and capability. And through this, the Argonians were able to migrate and settle other portions of Tamriel throughout thousands of years. One smaller known fact, though, is that during the Oblivion Crisis, where Oblivion gates opened up all over Tamriel and Daedra poured through to invade, the Hist actually were the ones who defended the lands of the Black Marsh. A call was put forth before the crisis occurred that summoned all of the Argonians across the continent back to the Black Marsh to prepare for war. And when they got there, the Hist helped transform many of the Argonian people into fearsome warriors that eventually drove off the invaders. What is so damning about this, though, is that almost no other races or leaders in Tamriel knew of the coming invasion, let alone so many years earlier than it actually occurred. This would mean that the Hist, a seemingly gentle race of sentient trees, must have known more than they are letting on. Being potentially the oldest living thing still on Tamriel, this race of trees may in fact house many answers to the secrets throughout this world. And even more so, they have been hiding many things from other races, including their ability to speak or communicate with Oblivion and other realms. On top of this, being able to command Argonians back to the Black Marsh for combat implies a sort of mind control that they have over the reptilian race, and could potentially mean that this symbiotic relationship may actually be one founded on slavery, where the Hist created the Argonians to do their bidding and explore and conquer the continent. Either way, something very mysterious is happening with the Hist. They know much more than they have let on. They have seen more than any other living beings on Tamriel, and may even be a demonic presence enslaving lower life forms to do their bidding, all in one of the harshest places in all of Tamriel, somewhere most explorers have failed to get information on, making it one of the least well-known and most interesting parts of the entire continent. The Grey Fox is one of the most mysterious and infamous figures in all of Tamriel. We were originally introduced to him in Oblivion as the leader of the Thieves Guild, where he has sat at its head for over 300 years, not as a Mer with a long lifespan, but weirdly as a human. Some regard him as fact, and some fiction, with many wanted letters spread throughout the Imperial City, and some news reports like this one. Grey Fox, man or myth? Is a so-called Thieves Guild member masterminding all the thefts in the Imperial City? Captain Harmonious Lex of the Imperial Watch seems to think so. When asked about the Thieves Guild and its mythical leader, the Grey Fox, the captain was quite emphatic. This one man is responsible for all crime in the city. The energetic and tenacious Captain Lex has therefore devoted himself to apprehending this masked menace. When questioned on the subject, Adamus Philada, Legion Commander and Captain Lex's immediate superior, had the following response. Ridiculous. The Grey Fox is but a fairy tale. There is no such thing as a Thieves Guild, and there never has been. Stories of an unstoppable thief called the Grey Fox have been circulating around the Imperial City for centuries. The stories claim he can turn invisible at will, shrink himself down to the size of a mouse, turn to mist and seep under locked doors, and perform any number of truly unbelievable feats. If even half of these stories are true, Captain Lex will have his hands full capturing the Grey Fox. If the player decides to follow the Oblivion Thieves Guild to its completion though, one of the best quest lines ever in Elder Scrolls, there's a big reveal at the end. The Grey Fox isn't actually just one person, but rather a large group of different people who have chosen to wear the cowl of the Grey Fox, otherwise known as Nocturnal's Cowl, giving them the power of the Daedric Prince's control of the sphere of night and darkness. You see, millennia ago, the first Thieves Guild leader ever actually managed to steal the cowl from Nocturnal, and thus she cursed it to forever banish its wearer, forcing all those who love and know them to forget about them forever. Even though the player is able to remove the curse from the cowl in Oblivion, it still has horrifying ramifications for the past. Who are these great thieves of history? And how do some people remember and tell stories of them? Could it be that the wearers of the cowl are nothing but figments of our imagination? And just how much of the Thieves Guild past can we truly trust now? We may never truly know. Another lesser known but fascinating region of Tamriel is Valenwood, home of the Wood Elves, who some refer to as the Bosmer. On the border of Elsewhere and Cyrodiil, and just across the sea from the Somerset Isles, Valenwood is a mostly uninhabited region. This is mainly due to the fact that the entire area is littered with vegetation and massive trees, some that reach over a mile into the sky that are imbued with magics that allow them to even move. There are some light swamp lands lining the western border against the sea, but for the most part, Valenwood is a large and hard to traverse land with many undiscovered or different creatures, like the ancient Imga, or ape people that roamed the lands for thousands of years. The Wood Elves are the main inhabitants, with scarcely few other peoples coming to stay here. And the Wood Elves themselves are interesting, being the smallest race in all of Tamriel, and also some of the most demented. You see, the Wood Elves or Bosmer in Valenwood agree to the Green Pact, where they will not harm any of the vegetation in the land. But this has not stopped them from turning to many other hellish rituals, like cannibalism for those who they have fought. In many ancient battles, the Bosmer would take the soldiers that they had slain and then eat them in a giant bonfire of sorts. Horrifying, to say the least. But the actual most terrifying thing about the entire region and its Bosmer people is an event called the Wild Hunt. It's an extremely rare occurrence that we only have some writings about, in which the Bosmer are called back to defend their homeland. And in order to do so, they all come together in massive numbers and sacrifice their souls to turn into giant monstrosities. Whether it's massive bears, winged beasts, or entirely new monsters, the Bosmers lose control of themselves once they have transformed or shapeshifted into these creatures and become ferocious, killing anything in their path. And many great armies have supposedly been obliterated this way. Many theories even state that a large handful of the most fantastical creatures we see in Oblivion, Morrowind, and Skyrim originally came from ancient great hunts in Valenwood, after which these majestic beasts combed all of Tamriel and settled into new homes. The third tier dives deeper into the mad and insane theories of all of Elder Scrolls. The theories that fundamentally alter how you see the universe and change your entire perception of its inhabitants. The Redguards are one of the less frequently seen races in all of the mainline Elder Scrolls games so far. And the main reason for this is that they're primarily situated in the western border of Elder Scrolls, and most likely where Elder Scrolls 6 will take place, Hammerfell. You see, the Yakutans, the original Redguards, fled their homeland Yakuta after it was reportedly enveloped by the sea thousands of years ago, finding their way to a new landmass, Tamriel. But in many ways, even more interesting than the Redguards themselves is what they potentially left behind on Yakuta, another massively powerful and lesser-known race called the Sinestral Elves, or the Left-Handed Elves, as referred to by the Yakutans. They were called this by the Red Guards or Yakutans because of the conflicts they constantly met themselves in. The Yakutans saw them as the opposite of the right way, and thus called them the Left-Handed Elves. And this may have been for good reason. The Sinestral Elves were said to have unbelievable power and grasp over nature and dark magics, rumored to be in constant communication with Daedra and sacrificing to their gods. The elves erected some of the largest and most impressive towers and structures in all of Nirn, and tales were told of how some of their greatest sorcerers could raise entire metropolises from beneath the sands, hidden from the naked eye. Their skin was said to be pitch black, with many members of their society donning many bright and colorful hair, garments, and jewelry. Their cities were paved with gold and riches, and their patrons enjoyed many luxuries even the Septim Empire could only dream of. The constant conflict between the Yakutans and the elves eventually led to the destruction of the elves, though, after many great battles, where the very few survivors are said to have died with the sinking of the landmass as the Yakutans left. Sadly, this is the extent of the well-written history and rumors we hear about the elves in some of the texts throughout the series. The real most interesting things about the Sinestral Elves, though, is what we don't know. For instance, one rumor argues that the sinking of Yakuta may actually have been the work of the Sinestral Elves themselves, in retaliation for Yakuta wiping out their race. We know that they had great power over nature and could raise cities from the sand, so maybe they could also submerge an entire continent in water. And if this rumor is true, how is it that the elves could have garnered such great strength? Was it their connection to the Daedra and Oblivion that gave them this edge? Another interesting observation about the Sinestral Elves as well is that they are one of, if not the only race of elves we know of that don't stem from the Altmer. You see, all elves in Tamriel stem from an original elvish people called the Altmer, who originally settled the Somerset Isles and then spread out across Tamriel and formed into new elf races like the Bosmer Wood Elves in Valenwood or the Dark Elves in Morrowind, and many more. But the Sinestral Elves are entirely different, and it begs the question, where did they come from? And was there an elvish father race beyond just the Altmer that we actually know nothing about? Could they all be descendants of the Elnafey, who apparently all Tamrielic elves stem from at one point? A mystery we may never find out. While the mainline Elder Scrolls games only take us across the continent of Tamriel, there are many other landmasses that reside across Nirn, each with their own rich history, lore, and people. The most notable of these, though, is Akavir, a massive landmass said to dwarf Tamriel that is just east and across a vast ocean. The land is home to 4 main ruling dominions. To the south, we have the Kang Mao, a race of civilized talking monkeys that live in floating rock cities. To the north, the Kamal, frozen demon giants that thaw out once a year to wage war. To the east, the Kopau Toon, a sprawling empire of talking tiger men. And finally, and the most dominant race over the region to the west, is the Saesi, a vampiric serpent army very capable in battle. In essence, Akavir is really just one degenerate zoo. There have been many expeditions from Tamriel's greatest kings and leaders to conquer parts of Akavir, but all have led to spectacular failure, usually with armies landing in the southwestern portion of the continent and meeting their death to the Saesi in horrible weather conditions. Even the past great emperor, Uriel V, is said to have succumbed to his death while invading Akavir many moons ago. And in fact, even the Saesi themselves have done the reverse and invaded Tamriel, where they took over massive sections of land, and one Saesi leader, named Verasuche, even established themselves for a short period as the potentate and main ruler of the Cyrodiilic Empire. But these events are still shrouded in great mystery, and many people of the modern eras do not even believe a majority of the stories, which makes the questions of this distant land even more interesting. Where did the Sayesi get their power? What are the Kamal really like? And are the stories and writings of this land and its amazing megastructures and underground caverns true? Or is it all just fairy tales? It is even claimed by some divine gods that Akavir is the true home of Nirn, with Tamriel simply being a little brother story that we see in the mainline games. Tamriel is host to many great towers, whether it be the Red Tower at Morrowind's volcano or the glorious White Gold Tower, also known as the Imperial Palace in the center of Cyrodiil, the centerpiece of the biggest city in Oblivion's mainline game. But perhaps the most interesting tower is actually the Adamantine Tower in High Rock, which is host to one of the most important lore events of all time. Also called the Zero Tower, the Adamantine Tower was built with perfectly smooth zero stones that made the walls glisten in the light, and it is the birthplace of what modern civilizations call convention. You see, in Elder Scrolls, convention was a major event during the Dawn era, where Akatosh, after the betrayal from Lorkhan, banished his heart to Morrowind, and along with this, devised the Edada, the original spirits that ruled over the new land of Nirn. These Edada were called gods and demons by the humans, and Aedra and Daedra by the Aldmer or elves. This Adamantine Tower was in many ways the birthplace of modern-day Nirn, but even to this day it houses many dark and interesting secrets. Deep within its walls lies a peculiar device called the Argent Aperture, a giant ring of 13 concentric circles, of which the meaning no one knows to this day. It is said that this megastructure could simply be a clock tracking the progression of each of the eras the world has progressed through so far. But some philosophers think that this device may actually be a riddle, which if unlocked could be a doorway to an entirely new realm beyond our comprehension, a realm above the gods, the Daedra, and above life itself. And as one of the oldest, if not the oldest structures in all of Tamriel, the Adamantine Tower presents an amazing amount of possibilities as to what might be behind the Argent Aperture that's housed inside. Whiterun is one of the most well-known cities in all of the Elder Scrolls series, and one of the first towns most Skyrim players will come across. What is less well known, though, is a small village on the very outskirts of Whiterun's holdings, a farming village referred to as Rorikstead. While most of Whiterun is known for its horrible soil and bad weather, Rorikstead, for some unknown reason, actually has amazing soil, and thus is the main supplier for crops to the entire city of Whiterun. But what on the surface seems to be a happy and productive community of farmers may be hiding something much more sinister. First of all, the current leader of the Hold, and who the village is named after, Rorik, claims that the Enclave has only existed for almost 30 years, and that he founded it after serving as a man in the army. But there just so happens to be 3 books in Skyrim that actually mention Rorikstead, and each of these references is well beyond 30 years old, one being from the Second Era 1600 years ago, and another being well over 4,000. Is Rorik lying to us? Did he simply find the town barren and rename it after himself to act as if he was the leader and trick others? Or could he actually be some sort of demented being that has been here for over a millennia? It only gets weirder from here, though. You see, in the town there's a young girl named Sissel, and if you talk to her, she briefly mentions how in her dreams she has been seeing a kind-hearted gray dragon, and she has foreseen some kind of prophecy. This sounds eerily similar to the prophecy we envision from Parthenax, the hidden gray dragon only the Dragonborn and the Greybeards know of. So how would it be this innocent little girl has any idea about the coming conflict of the main story? If we follow her around for some time, we will eventually discover that she has a close relationship with another man in the town named Joanne, who is the village healer and has taken a special liking to Sissel, seeing some sort of potential in her and inviting her to his house often. On the surface, this could simply be a nice old man trying to teach a young child some useful skills. But hidden in Joanne's home, in one of his desks, is a very peculiar book, The Spirit of Daedra, a book we only see 3 times in all of Skyrim, one of them being here. The book is very rare, and it's a sacred Daedric and demonic presence, and the fact that Joanne even has it is especially terrifying. But it only gets worse, because the town of Rorikstead has almost no woman. Most of the men you talk to mention how their wives or mothers were lost, and that the village healer, Joanne, was not able to save them. But what if Joanne had not failed to save these women, but rather succeeded in killing them? Maybe the reason this small and quaint village actually has such rich and healthy soil isn't just pure chance, but actually the work of a Daedric-worshipping crazy man, Joanne, who is sacrificing the fertile woman in the town in order to guarantee good crop yields. Camelworks, an amazing Elder Scrolls YouTuber, even went deeper into this theory and found that Lund's hut, a small building located right behind Rorikstead, may even hold more evidence. In the hut, we find a deceased man named Lund, who has apparently taken his life with poison we find on the table. And next to his hut, we find a memorial of sorts, with flowers and candles, as well as a wedding ring, which seems to imply he has sought his end with sadness after losing his wife. Yet another female who has left us in close proximity to Rorikstead. And most damning of all, if you're able to actually clip through the game bounds in this hut, you are met with mysterious and ominous green glowing mist in the abyss of nothing, except for one book, the Book of Daedra, suspended in mid-air in an area no players are ever supposed to be able to get to. Could this be a clue from the developers that this little town may in fact be hiding one big secret? Another mystery left unsolved. Finally, our fourth tier is a look and plunge into the most insane, disturbing, or fantastical theories in all of Elder Scrolls. The theories that will keep us all up at night. The Dwemer, also known as the Deep Elves or the People of the Deep, are one of the most well-discussed and theorized topics in the entire Elder Scrolls series, and for good reason. You see, they are one of the great and long-lost civilizations of Tamriel, that if the rumors are to be believed, mysteriously vanished in an instant, only leaving their ruins for us to discover and study today. During their heyday, the Dwemer were a very non-confrontational race, who built massive cities and megastructures deep beneath the surface of Nirn. They dwarfed all other civilizations on Tamriel from a technological standpoint, mainly due to their mastery of what is called tonal manipulation. They would construct massive acoustic contraptions, referred to as tonal architecture, deep underground in large domes that were said to have power to alter the very reality of space-time itself. The structures produced sound waves that could terraform large cave systems, create holistic and powerful medicines, and by all accounts, even see into the future. It was the foundation from which the Dwemer found their power, and even in modern-day Tamriel, thousands of years later, no race or civilization has even come close to harnessing this power that the Dwemer had already achieved mastery of. This means that the ruins we stumble upon in many of the Elder Scrolls mainline games are much more advanced than even what we see in the great towns of our eras that we play in. These impressive accomplishments even led the Dwemer to reject a belief in the gods of Elder Scrolls, along with the Divines and Daedra. Not that they didn't know they existed. After all, gods and magic is very prevalent in Elder Scrolls. It would be impossible to reject they exist. However, the Dwemer didn't see them as most races do. They instead saw them as equals. The Dwemer simply postulated that with further mastery of tonal manipulation, they too would have the powers that the gods held over them. Sadly though, this may have actually resulted in the Dwemer's ultimate downfall, and one of the most horrifying moments in the entire series. During their empire's reign, the Dwemer were in constant conflict with the Chimer, another powerful civilization of its time, and a large war was taking place in an area around Morrowind, and more specifically around Morrowind's great volcano, Red Mountain. Even with all the Dwemer's superior technology, they could not hold back the Chimer forces and their magics, assisted by the Divines and Daedra, who despised the Dwemer for their beliefs. After losing almost all of their foothold in the region and being pushed back to their base at Red Mountain, with their backs against the wall, a Dwemer leader named Kaggernak did the unthinkable. Using the most advanced and sophisticated tonal manipulation techniques possible, he began to extract the heart of Lorkhan, which was deep hidden within Red Mountain, the heart of the banished god who created Nirn in the first place. And just as the heart was activated, in an instant, a flash of light overcame the entire region of Tamriel, and in that moment, all Dwemer disappeared. Right in the heat of battle, this entire civilization and their people were gone forever. Their weapons lay dormant on the ground. Their underground cities were now wide open and untouched, which is how we're able to see them today. So what exactly happened that fateful day at Red Mountain? What did the Dwemer truly do with the heart of Lorkhan? Had they finally found a way to transport into the realm of the gods, finally fulfilling their prophecy of being on the same plane as them? Or had they gone too far? Had their own hubris damned their entire race to death, trying to mess with magics and powers they did not truly yet understand? It's a mystery even many Bethesda developers have spoken on many occasions, even Daddy Todd himself. But it's because of that we will purposely never get any definitive answers, most likely. The best proof we may have is actually a supposed surviving Dwemer named Yagrum Bargan, who we meet in Morrowind, who does in fact tell us that he is the only remaining and surviving Dwemer, spared by the gods as a sick joke. He seems to believe that the Dwemer may be stuck in some other unknown realm, and there may eventually be a way to get them out. For a game series named after the fabled and powerful Elder Scrolls, you would think that we would have a ton more information on them. But the actual scrolls themselves only take center stage in a handful of quests and writing in the mainline series. The Elder Scrolls are said to be one of the most divine and powerful items in all of Nirn, and were apparently originally crafted by the Aedra or gods of the realm. The parchment of each scroll tells not only an account of the past, deeply etched into its pages, but also, and more hauntingly, a look into the future. Strangely though, these future prophecies are different for each individual who reads even the same scroll, and seem to simply be a guess at what the future may hold. It begs the question, could the Elder Scrolls be some sort of proof that this beloved series is actually taking place in a multiverse, where an infinite amount of combinations and permutations of our future are present, and it is only in our timeline that we will see which paths we took, etched on the paper for all of us to see? Either way though, the Elder Scrolls certainly have some sort of significant importance to the flow of time in the series, as we know that dragon breaks, or moments in the series that break the linearity of time, are not recorded, further implying that the universe is slowly cascading into more and more infinite time breaks that the scrolls are trying to maintain. These are called dragon breaks after Akatosh, the god of time, and we know that the scrolls have significant power against dragons specifically, another indication of their power over time and reality itself. While the scrolls are rare and in many hard-to-reach locations, there are also many located in the Imperial Sanctum of the White Gold Tower in Cyrodiil as well. It is said that those who do not wield great magics and technologies can be blinded or turned insane even by witnessing or being in the presence of their great power. The Falmer are one of the most tragic and shocking stories in all of the series. An entire race that was turned into nothing but a monstrosity, banished to a life of meaningless horror in the deepest depths of Nirn. You see, a long time ago there was another elvish or mer race on Tamriel, and more specifically, native to Skyrim, called the Snow Elves. They retained immense power in the region, along with the Dwemer of the time, but a new adversary was starting to encroach on the land as well. Human Nords in the north, from the northern continent of Atmora, from across the sea were now starting to settle on the northern parts of Skyrim. And for some unknown reason, maybe due to the Nords finding an ancient relic, that being the Eye of Magnus, the Snow Elves launched an attack on the Nordic capital of Skyrim, Sarthal, slaughtering countless innocent Nordic peoples. In retaliation, a massive and powerful army of Nords sailed across the sea from Atmora to Skyrim to help their brethren, and managed to decimate their Snow Elf foes, pushing them back to their final cities in pure defeat. As a last-ditch effort, the Snow Elves reached out to the Dwemer, asking for help, for them to use their machines and great underground capitals to defend them, instead of sitting idly by. And the Dwemer actually accepted this proposition, but on only one condition. The Snow Elves had to take a poison that would blind them, and stay within the depths of their deepest underground cities. The original story states that this is how the Falmer were born, that the Dwemer blinded them all, and then used them as a giant slave workforce to create more massive tonal architecture. But the problem with this is, why would the Dwemer actually need this? They already had massive robotic machines that did all the work, and for a usually peaceful race, simply subjugating the Snow Elves to such torture for no reason seems out of character. On top of this, how did the Snow Elves go from this to this? Certainly the lack of sunlight and blindness would have caused some alterations, but becoming the monster we know now as Falmer seems like a bit of a stretch. More modern theories from many YouTubers like Avarti actually presume that this radical transformation into Falmer monstrosity may have actually occurred for a different reason. As we know, the Dwemer had an obsession with ascending to the realm of the gods, as they saw themselves as equals. So what if the Snow Elves were actually being used in some sort of experiment, to see if they could be transcended into a new realm as a guinea pig, before the Dwemer actually tried it on themselves? This is potentially implied in the Dwemer tablet from Calcio, which we can find in-game in Skyrim in the Hard Answers questline, which at one point, when translated into English, states, "And so it was your people were given passage to our steam gardens and the protection of our power. Many of your people have perished under the roaring, snow-throated kings of Mara, and your wills were broken. Only by the grace of the Dwemer did your race survive. We did not ask for thanks, for we do not believe in it. We do not ask for gratitude, for we do not believe in it. We only request that you partake in the symbol of our bond, the fruit of the stones around us. And as your vision clouds, as the darkness sets in, fear not. Know only our mercy and the radiance of our affection unbinds your bones to the earth before you, and sets your final path to the music of your new eternity." This tablet seems to be a record of the agreement between the Snow Elves and Dwemer, and if true, it implies that this guinea pig theory is most likely correct. It could be that these twisted experiment by the Dwemer slowly transform the Snow Elves into these demented creatures, and when the Dwemer themselves mysteriously vanished out of nowhere, these damaged and damned Snow Elves had to learn to fend for themselves deep underground, all while being blinded and alone. A truly harrowing idea, that the once great race of the Snow Elves were tortured and abused so much that over time they became one of the scariest enemies in all of Skyrim. I mentioned earlier in this tier list that Oblivion has some of the best and most haunting quests in the entire series, and this is another great example of that. At one point you travel back to an inn you may have frequented in the game and discover that a nice young Argonian lady named Dharma has gone missing. Her mother instructs you to search for her along the route she took, and this takes you to a small and run-down town in the middle of the forest, called Hackdirt. The residents here are extremely creepy, with many ignoring you or being short with their answers, having discussions about why you are here behind your back, and one patron who will even follow you around the city everywhere you go, watching everything you are doing. Luckily for the player though, there is one citizen who, if you ask about the town, asks that you meet him after dark, alone and away from the others. If you do so, he reveals to you that 80 years ago, when this town was being created, many of the miners underneath the city in the cave network discovered strange and disturbing beings that they called the Deep Ones. Some of these people had turned into what the town called brethren, and now live in the caves with distorted faces and bodies. The rest of the town now worships these deities, and has been told by them that they must sacrifice others in order to summon the Deep Ones once again. This is most certainly what is happening to Dharma, but this mystery gets even weirder the closer we look. If we go to the church at night, we can see that all the town residents are going in and listening to sermons from this book. And if we go in later and read it for ourselves, we discover that it is full of nothing but Daedric symbols. Pretty damning evidence for sure. And this leads us to 3 theories of what could have happened here, with the final one being another awesome theory from the YouTuber Camelworks. The first theory postulates that the Deep Ones could be Dwemer, as Dwemer are referred to as the Deep Elves. But really, this holds very little weight, as everything else around the story doesn't sound like the Dwemer at all. The second theory states that the Deep Ones could actually be the lesser-known race called the Slowed, giant toad-like monsters that are well known for their extensive slave trade networks and even working with Daedric princes, which would explain the Daedric symbols in the book. Even more interestingly, if we translate this book in the church, it translates exactly to a book written by a Slowed in the Elder Scrolls offshoot game Redguard, word for word. Either this is an Easter egg or a very specific clue as to what the Deep Ones really are. The Deep Ones being Sloweds would make so much sense, as they could be asking for sacrifices for their trade routes or to some Daedric prince. And the final theory argues that the Daedric book in the church is in fact just a straightforward clue that the Deep Ones are Daedra. And more specifically, the town is sacrificing to either Lord Dagon, one of the main adversaries in the Oblivion main game, or even more likely Molag Bal, as this would explain the sacrifices specifically, as Molag Bal is keen to receive blood and soul sacrifices. Either way, there is a harrowing voice we can hear deep within those caves beneath the town of Hactor, the only instance of this line in all of Oblivion. So something very clearly sinister is happening in this town. Thanks again so much for watching, guys. These videos take a ton of research, writing, and editing, as you can imagine, so I really appreciate all of the support you guys have given. Whether it's on this video, my Cyberpunk theory video, or my Mass Effect one, or the future ones I'll be making, thank you so much for taking the time to support my channel, watch, comment, and help spread really all the work I'm doing here. And I hope you all have a nice day.